Hello, boys and girls. Today we're going to talk about effective PowerPoints and the do's and don'ts of presenting. This will hopefully help you as you are in your small groups creating these PowerPoints and also during the presentations that we will do later. Please feel free, if any of this information is new to you or you would like to write it down, pick a page in your interactive student notebooks and don't forget to add it to your table of contents. Additionally, if you ever need to pause, rewind, or fast forward through this information, you have the ability to do that as well. All right, here we go. First thing I want to talk about are effective slides. These are just a few of the things you would like to keep in mind as you're creating your slides. The first thing is to pick a nice clear background, and one of the best ways to do that is to pick one of the defaults that PowerPoint has already selected for you in their program. It doesn't necessarily have to be super boring or just plain white, but it does to be clear. The next thing is to consider readable fonts. You don't have to, again, be super boring, but you don't want to pick anything that is italics or too funky that you're not going to be able to read it clearly. So think of yourself sitting through these presentations and having to take notes and what font is easiest on your eyes. The next thing to consider is to be concise, which means to be not wordy. So you notice that I don't have whole entire paragraphs up here. I don't even have complete sentences. All I have are bullet points that remind me as the presenter what I'm going to say next. They're the key points that you want your audience to know, and it's also a guide for you as the presenter to add to what you're talking about on the slide. And then the last thing is that it should still be complimentary to you, the presenter. So you don't have to pick something that's completely against your personality. If you're not a very girly girl, don't pick one that has paisley flowers and scrolls and stuff like that. Pick something that you enjoy looking at as well, and that will help the audience connect with you in that way. Here's an example of an inappropriate slide. This is like what not to do. Even though the background is kind of funky and cool, a lot of people like that tie-dye look, it's not appropriate. You can barely read it. Also, the font, the second one down is the font, illegible font or unreadable font. Again, the color is inappropriate on that background. It's very hard to read. It's also italics and like the funky, I think it's called Blackadder font, where it's very hard to read. You have to read a whole PowerPoint just on those in that font, your eyes would get really tired. You also don't want to have crowded slides. It is okay to add a picture, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But in this case, all of the pictures are overlapping. They're too big. They don't have anything to do with the topic. And then finally, the last thing is the distracting effects. So a lot of times you can add animations. If you notice, you can have the page flip in different ways. And we'll talk about that in just a minute, but keep it consistent and don't overdo it. Okay, so here it takes a long time, and then everyone's sort of just waiting for your slide to finish. It's animations, and it gets kind of long and boring. All right, moving on. Let's talk about sound and animations, like I just said. Sounds are really neat. PowerPoint has a bunch of sounds built in, hands clapping, drums beating, animal sounds, bells ringing. But if you overuse them, you're going to lose the effectiveness of them. So if you want to use sounds, just use them sparingly, and only to emphasize big points, major points. You feel like halfway through your audience may be dozing a little bit, you could add the sound effects to snap them back in to listening to you. But the last thing, and the most important thing probably, is that they should relate to your topic. So those of you that have music or entertainment as your topics, you may want to consider putting in some African sounds if you can find them, African drum beats. But other than that, you really want to use sounds sparingly. And the same thing with animations. Again, PowerPoint has a lot of different options for animations, and they are effective if they're used correctly. So again, you want to use them sparingly, if at all. They must relate to the topic, so don't just have words spinning in for any particular reason, okay? And then be consistent on each slide. So have the same animation on each slide if you want to switch the way the pages turn, have it be consistent throughout your presentation. And I'm going to show you an example of both of those things. Right, a little much, okay, there's hands clapping, why, I don't know, all these things come flying in, not only at the same time, but in different ways, which is a little bit ineffective. And then the last thing is that the title comes in last, which again is not very appropriate. So this would be an example of what not to do. Right, here's a good example of what you could do. The title is already on the page, so we know what it's about. We know what the topic is right away. Then you could have the bullet points fly in separately, or dissolve in, or appear separately. And this will help people focus on one of your bullet points at a time. So instead of putting everything up on the screen and people are like jotting down quickly their notes, you can, have them fly in. So now we're focused just on the fact that it's written by Chinua Achebe. The next point, the setting is Nigeria and Africa. Okay, we're focusing on one thing at a time. And you can add information about these bullet points as you're speaking. Okay, moving on, don't forget if you need to pause or rewind, you are more than welcome to do so. Next, we're going to talk about backgrounds. So we already kind of touched on this a little bit, but backgrounds, you need to ask yourself, does it relate to your topic? Can I read the font color? And is it distracting from the content? So the focus of PowerPoint presentations, clearly, is to get the information across to your reader, obviously, right? That's why you're doing these presentations. You also want to get a good grade from your teacher, me, but ultimately, you really want to, have the class understand what you're talking about. So the last one here is really important. Is it distracting from the content? If the audience is focused more on what's going on your slides than what you're saying about the information, you're not really being an effective presenter. The font color is going to be important. You want to be able to have a high contrast. So if you have a brightly colored background, like this one is white, you want to pick a darker font color, like black. If you have like a darker background, like black or gray, you want to pick a lighter color, right, like white or yellow. So just be conscious of that. And it may help in the computer lab if you just take a step back, stand across the room, can you still read the color on the background on the screen? Okay. The font choice, again, you want to consider the size of your font, and I'm going to give you a suggestion here, if I can pull up my pen option. All right, so for size, you really want to stay no less than like 24 point. That's a good size for presentation. This size on my slide right here, I think is around 24, 26, so you can see how well that looks to you. You also need a readable style, and we're going to talk a little bit about the words sans serif and serif. Okay, after each of the fonts that are listed, sometimes it'll say serif font or sans serif font, and serif in Latin means feet or foot. Sans means without. So sans serif would be without feet. The feet are those little things at the bottom. Like if you look at Times New Roman, you'll see the little feet at the end of each word. That is a serif font if it has those little dots at the end. Those are great for reading, for print sources. So the serif fonts with the feet are good for print because studies have shown that it actually creates a line as you're reading. On a screen, though, you want the less amount of stuff as possible because it really starts to hurt the eyes to focus on that with the light and the color and all that stuff. So for PowerPoints or screen images, you really want to go with a sans serif font without the feet. So these are better for presentations, just because there's less stuff on the screen that way. You don't have these extra feet to look at. Right, and again, the color is going to depend on your background, so you want a high contrast color. Okay? The other thing you should keep in mind with readable style before we move on is that it should be straight up and down. It doesn't need to be bolded. It shouldn't be italicized. Try to stay away from the shadows or the embedded or engraving type of options. Just very plain and simple so it's easy for your audience to see. Okay, here's an example of a not good slide, right? The background, although super cute, little kitty, has nothing to do with Things Fall Apart. No spoilers here, but there's no kitties in Things Fall Apart. The title is really big and bold, which is nice. However, then the information that you actually want the people to see is really tiny. So you want to consider the size as well, make it applicable. Obviously, the information that you're trying to get across is much more important than just the title. And it's also in an italic font, which some people really have trouble reading. And the colors here are not bad, but they're not so great. Okay, so this is an example of what not to do. Hi, kitty. And here's a good example of a slide. This background is not so boring. It's not just white. It is a picture of Africa. That's the country, but it's a neutral color. On top of it, the black writing really stands out. It's a good size. It's not super big, but it's big enough that people in the back of the room could see it. I believe this is 32 font. And again, you have the no italics for the font, and it's just, kind of plain but easy to read. All right, so as an English teacher, I cannot stress this enough. Please, please, please check your spelling and your word usage. Use spell check, reread to check for grammar and correct word use, and be concise again. You don't want to have entire paragraphs on your slide. Bullet points are fine. You can add information as you're speaking. Please use spell check, especially with all the African words. Double check to make sure that they're spelled correctly, because I've been teaching this book for about 10 years, so I know how they're supposed to be spelled, and I'm going to be looking for that. It's right next to you, either on the page that you found it in or in your book right in front of you, so please, please, please use the correct spelling of those African words. And also reread to check for grammar mistakes. There's lots of synonyms and homonyms in our language, so make sure you have the correct there, the right to, all that kind of stuff, so you're not using the wrong one. Here's an example, couple spelling mistakes, and I'll let you see if you can pick those out for yourself, but this would drive me crazy. Okay, Chinua Achebe is an interesting name, however, it is right on your book cover, so you should be able to spell that correctly. Same thing with the title. Ibu does have two different spellings, so either one would be correct. And of course, this is the incorrect use of there. It makes me cringe. All right, photos and videos. This may not be appropriate for this exact topic, but you may be doing PowerPoint presentations in the future where this comes up, so I wanted to touch on it. For photos, you want to use photos that are appropriate to your topic and slide. Again, don't just slap a picture on there because you think it's cute. There was one kid I had a couple years ago who always wanted to put like a dancing hippo on his slide. And he's like, oh, it's an inside joke with me and my friend. And I said, that's great for you and your friend. Put it on your Facebook page or your Vine or your Instagram, but I don't want to see it on an educational, quote unquote professional thing. I don't know what it means, so I don't want to feel left out. If you are going to put pictures on your topic or slide, please discuss them. Don't just slap them up there. I'm going to go back and show you an example in just a second. But you want to talk about the pictures. Here's a picture of Chinua Achebe if you're using that. Here's a picture of a plantain. This is what an aubergine looks like, whatever the case is, but just explain it to us. Don't just breeze on past. And then, of course, you need to cite the source. This is really easy to do for pictures. I'm going to show you again an example in just a minute. And then consider the size of the picture too. You don't want it to be too overwhelming, but you also don't want it to be too small either. So this would be, again, an example of ineffective pictures. They're too big, they're overlapping each other. I didn't even really talk about them. They also have nothing to do with the content of the slide. Here's a good one. Although this picture doesn't have that much to do with the slide, I was trying to find one that would be effective. Here is, it's small enough that it doesn't overpower the words, but it also is big enough that you can tell what it is. I have a caption down here so people know what the picture is, and then here is my pseudo credit, or my what's it called? The citation. Sorry. All right, we are going to move on to back to that other slide. Hold on 1 second. I'll pull that up. There we go. Videos, shorten the time as needed, introduce them with context, and then discuss them either before or after. Again, that may not be appropriate for this presentation. I don't think anyone really found videos to show, but in the future it may be effective. All right, so here's an example of maybe an ineffective picture. It is big, it's nice to see, it's a little bit fuzzy, but it's kind of taking away from or distracting from the words, okay? The content, again, the content is the most important part. Also, there's no caption and there's no citation. So again, this would probably be this is an example of an ineffective slide. This is much easier to read. You have your words that are not affected by the picture. Here's the picture, this is Chinua Achebe, and then here is the citation at the bottom. And I'm going to show you a really easy way to do a citation. So if you go to Google or Bing or wherever you want to go and you want to search for something, we're just going to look for giraffe. Pretend like that's important. Okay, images of a giraffe, and let's say that I like this one. I like this one actually. He's so cute. Here's my image of my giraffe. If you go right up here underneath, you click on it, and then right up here is the website that it came from. Right? If you copy and paste that picture into your presentation, all you have to do is highlight that, right click on it, go to copy, and then also paste just this underneath the picture. And that's all you need for your citation. You don't need a complete MLA citation like we were talking about the other day. So it is as easy as that. Okay, again, you can see that as an example right here. This is the website where I got the picture from. And then you're done. That's it, all you need for picture citations. All right, so we do need to cite our sources though, speaking of which. Follow MLA format. Most of the sources that you have should be in or should have had a citation with them in the databases like we talked about. If not, you can use citationmachine.net or bibme.com, and either of those sites will take you through how to cite a source. Citationmachine.net or bibme.org. Okay, either of those will help you with that. Just remember that we are using MLA format, not APA or Chicago style. There's a couple different styles. You want to consider copyright issues, please do not copy and paste things. Put it into your own words, use bullets. And then if you could, at the very end, your last slide should be a compiled works cited page for the sources you used in the presentation. Not every source you found, just the sources that you used. Okay, so if you found the same information on 2 different sources, just pick one to list on there. And please put the list in alphabetical order by the first thing that's listed. So it's usually the author's last name or the title of the article. And you can make one big works cited page for all of your sources. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about are good presentations. Now we talked about how to do PowerPoints. Now we're going to talk about what to do while you're up there presenting. Obviously, the first thing would be to speak clearly to the audience. A lot of times I see students come up and they just want to read from the slides. So So they look at the board, they stand with their back to the class, and that really drowns out your voice. So you want to speak to the audience, looking at your peers, at your classmates, and not at the board. Please, we are going to make some note cards to go along with these presentations. Please add information to your slides. Don't just read directly from the slides. And that will be, I guess that's an additional benefit, or you're going to automatically do this if you are concise on your slides. So if you only use bullet points instead of typing out exactly everything you want to say word for word, sentence by sentence, then that will help it. So bullet points, and then add to that based on more information that you're going to read from a note card. Please know your pronunciations. This is super important for this project and for this unit. There are a lot of African words, a lot of African names. Please ask me. I will be more than happy to pronounce it for you, have you repeat it back to me. I'll spell it out phonetically if you'd like. But practice that before you get up here so that you don't embarrass yourself in front of everybody else. And then if you're in groups, which you are for this project, please divide the slides ahead of time and divide it in a way that makes sense. So if you're working together in a group that has the same topic, like our author groups, Chinua Achebe, 2 people have the exact same topic, decide in advance who you want to say each slide. And my suggestion would be to group them together. So one person speaks for one group of slides, 1 through 5, slides 1 through 5, and then the next person speaks from slides 6 through 10 instead of a back and forth. It's very distracting. So, group it in groups instead of like every other slide. If you have several people that have different topics, just decide the order that you want to present the information that makes most sense, and then each person would be responsible for their own information. And that is the end, and I hope you've learned some things, or at least the examples of the good and bad examples helped you a little bit. If you need to go back and make adjustments based on these suggestions, please don't hesitate to do that either. All right, have fun. See you guys in class.